Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News Weekend. The Turtle Mountain Indian Reservation in North Dakota was celebrating the return home of one of their members. After 49 years in prison, Leonard Peltier was granted clemency and will serve the rest of his double murder sentence for his role in the deaths of 2 FBI agents in 1975 while at his home. T.R. Wheatley was at his welcome home celebration and has this report.
A grand entry and honoring nearly 50 years in the making for one man, Leonard Peltier, a well-known member of the American Indian Movement, or AIM.
Something I didn't do.
Thousands of people from all over the U.S. and Canada came to the Skydancer Event Center on the Turtle Mountain Indian Reservation in North Dakota. Fabian Hurd traveled from Bemidji, Minnesota.
Well, my older sister, she was an activist. I mean, I never did understand what AIM was about until I grew older. And so that's what brought me here today, welcoming Leonard home.
Even Terry Nelson from Rosal River in southern Manitoba, an AIM activist, made the trip.
Happy that he's going to end up at some point in a Sundance, which is going to, that's the spirituality of our people is still there.
For Jer Peltier, it was a chance to meet his great-uncle for the first time.
This is really important for the community, but on an international level, on an international Indigenous political level, this is, a really big deal. This is, again, something that has been advocated for so long by so many people.
Peltier had hundreds of cameras on him all day long, from media to regular people and their cell phones to an entire documentary crew headed up by Jane Myers.
And I think as Native people, the way that we were 30 years ago, 40 years ago, even 25 years ago, we didn't have this A game. And we didn't have filmmakers that were making films and that were behind the helm to tell our stories from our point of view.
Myers' documentary called Free Leonard Peltier aired at the Sundance Film Festival. She plans to add his return home to the film. Myers says she's in talks with 4 major companies for distribution. Because of this, Peltier was not doing interviews with news networks. Peltier went to prison for killing 2 FBI agents in 1975 on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. He and many others in Indian country maintain he was locked up based on false evidence. While he didn't get a pardon, he got clemency last month by outgoing U.S. President Joe Biden, with poor health cited as reasoning for him to serve out the remainder of his sentence on house arrest. During the homecoming, organizers reminded spectators all day long to give Peltier space for his immune system. Turtle Mountain Tribal Chairman Jamie Azure was amongst Peltier's support letters for clemency. Azure wasn't born yet when Peltier was sentenced.
Leonard Peltier's name was almost a character in a book for most of my life until this leadership position. And now it's almost like bringing characters to life and really sitting down and saying it's a real person. And he really did go through these things.
A figure that many here, including 17-year-old Kurt Fleury, only learned about in school. He's come to show support and wants to talk with his fellow tribal member.
Ask him how it felt whenever he got sentenced and how those people made him feel.
There are some, including the FBI, who believe Peltier shouldn't have been granted clemency, as well as those who believe he was complicit in the circumstances surrounding fellow AIM member Annie Mae Pictou Aquash's murder, who say they can't support someone who condones violence on Indigenous women. But for those at his homecoming, they didn't let those concerns dampen their spirits. T.R. Wheatley, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
To Manitoba now, where some community members from the Pinaymootang First Nation are questioning the RCMP's response to a house fire where human remains were found. The fire broke out on the evening of Friday, February 7th, but the remains were not discovered until Sunday, February 9th. Sierra Bettens has that story.
Manitoba RCMP confirmed that it was 2 local officials on site on Sunday who entered onto the debris and located the partial remains. In a Tuesday email sent to APTN, RCMP spokesperson Paul Manegra said the fire department conducted a search on Saturday and did not find remains. Manegra added that this type of search is not done by RCMP personnel. The fire has been deemed suspicious, and RCMP are investigating. Less than 2 weeks before the fatal fire, and on January 31st, 50-year-old April Woodhouse was found outside a residence in Pinaymootang in medical distress. She later died in hospital, and an autopsy has determined her death was not due to exposure or physical injuries. Woodhouse's death is still under investigation. On Saturday, the Southern Chiefs Organization issued a press release calling for improved policing in Pinaymootang. Pinaymootang Chief Curvis Anderson stated, quote, "It is clear there is an obvious need to explore all avenues of increased policing and the overall safety for my people. I call on all levels of government to work with us to find a solution for this incredibly difficult time for our nation. Lives depend on it." Sierra Bettens, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
First Nation in Quebec was celebrating on Wednesday as the federal court partially ruled in favor of the Kaybowick First Nation in their fight to protect their ancestral lands from the risk of nuclear waste contamination. Kaybowick demanded a judiciary review in early 2024, soon after a federal regulatory body approved a low-level radioactive waste disposal site be built near the Ottawa River. The court has ordered the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories and Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission to continue holding consultations with Kaybowick, saying these companies failed to uphold the United Nations Declaration of Independence in their decision-making process. Chief Lance Heyman says he's very happy with this decision. He calls it a win for First Nations across the country, as well as a win for non-Indigenous friends and neighbors who supported the cause.
With this decision and the necessity to include UNDRIP, in part of the decision-making, will have a ripple effect across the country with other First Nations who you now can, take this judgment and use it as a basis to say that, UNDRIP is not something that will be applied to in the future once the Canadian government's done its work on the UNDA action plan. It should have and needs to be immediately applied in all circumstances where Indigenous rights are being impacted directly.
The Yukon government says 19 million liters of cyanide-contaminated water is leaking from a storage pond at the Eagle Gold Mine site. The mine site near the community of Mayo, Yukon, is located on the traditional territory of the First Nation of Nacho-Nayakdun. Last summer, the mine experienced a heap leach failure, causing millions of tons of cyanide-contaminated rocks to be released into the nearby environment. Officials say the leaking pond will need to be drained and ice buildup will need to be removed. There's no timeline yet for when those repairs will take place. Recent tests indicate that leaked water is now impacting nearby Haggard Creek, which is showing contamination levels above short-term aquatic guidelines.
The data is showing us a cumulative effect from the containment pond leak and the ongoing contamination that continues to enter Haggard Creek from the heap leach failure. In cases where contaminants exceeded their aquatic life guidelines, there could be negative effects to the health of fish and other organisms.
After more than a century, the Haida Nation is getting their land back. The Haida signed a historic agreement with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on Monday to recognize their title over the Haida Gwaii Islands in British Columbia's north coast. Trudeau held back tears, telling the Haida Nation that he couldn't think of a better place as one of his final stops as Prime Minister.
Haida Gwaii belongs to you, the Haida.
Gagwis Jason Elsop, the president of the Council of the Haida Nation, said the historic agreement represents a move from an era of denial, occupation, and resistance to one of peaceful coexistence and recognition of Haida land, which is now called the Big Tide Haida Tidal Lands Agreement, will affirm that the Haida have title over specific Crown land in the area. Trudeau called the agreement a monumental step and that he stayed true to the principles of truth and reconciliation to restore Canada's relationship with Indigenous peoples. The transition is expected to take 5 years and will require legislation to help address some of the details. Private property owners in the area will not be impacted. Sebastian Gaskin dropped a new album on Friday. We've got a look at that album for you after the break. Welcome back to APTN National News Weekend. A journalism course is being offered to Indigenous students in Kanesatake Mohawk territory near Montreal, Quebec. As Savannah Craig reports, not only does it teach skills for Indigenous people to get into the field, it also provides understanding about how colonialism affects Indigenous peoples.
Controlling your environment. So if you got to do an interview.
These students are learning how to record audio.
I make sure you did record.
Yes. Test 1, 2, 3.
This gives them the tools to develop their own report or a podcast.
It was a dream of mine to do a podcast, and I had no tools to do it.
Fortunately, she came across an advertisement for this course in the Mohawk newspaper, The Eastern Door. Carol Lalonde is Dakota Sioux from Manitoba, but lives in Montreal.
I grabbed the opportunity, so that's why I'm here.
The course is offered in Kanesatake to Indigenous people of all ages and from all communities to learn journalism.
To worry about the levels, like where they are.
It's not only for students with no skills, but also for those with experience in the field.
The music that moves me the most,
including Hank McGregor Phillips, who never received formal training despite being hired as a radio DJ in 2011.
They hired me on my voice, so I'm learning everything. I learned everything backwards, so this course really is going to help me with learning the fundamentals of what real certified radio DJs actually do.
The course is more than just teaching students journalism skills. It's also about strengthening Indigenous representation in the profession of journalism, providing opportunities for journalists to understand the historical context of colonialism.
Like a journalist still has to be balanced, right? And still has to tell the correct story. But when you know the background, you can tell it a different way, provide a deeper understanding. What's a good recording level?
Sylvain Gaspé is the instructor for the sound production class.
Get your recording equipment, your mobile recording equipment ready.
He recalls working in media during the 1990 Oka crisis. Or as he calls it, the 1990 uprising at Kanesatake.
I spent my whole career outside, not in an Indigenous company, but in CBC Radio-Canada, and all my colleagues, and I had to always explain what's the real story.
Gaspé says this was a defining moment in identifying the lack of representation
and this ain't a surrender either.
And understanding of Indigenous people in mainstream media.
When mainstream media and news outlets heard of this event happening, this tragic event, they didn't have any background of who we were, and they didn't even know we were here. So it took a lot of backtracking and research into the history. So some of the good journalists tried to do that, right? But it's always been a struggle.
Here, just quiet.
At the end of the course, students will do an internship at a media outlet. This could be a local Mohawk outlet or a mainstream media outlet. Developing the course didn't come without its challenges.
Even though they're saying it doesn't apply to Indigenous English communities, well, it's wrong what they're doing to us.
Michelle Lamouche is the manager of the Kanesatake Employment and Training Service Center. She applied for funding to make the course possible. She says students can't receive their certification until the Quebec government gives written approval as a result of French language law 14.
The government of Quebec say it doesn't apply to Indigenous people, but It does in a sense, because we have to have the permission or the signature of the minister to be able to be offered in English communities.
So you have to ask a question that's open-ended.
For Gaspe, this course is also about uplifting the community.
Gunassadage was never really in any media. I remember as a young person reading the newspaper, and every time there was something about something local, I would cut it out and save it or something like that. And it was really rare because once we were in the news, oh wow, we're in the news. You're going to create a high quality recording that meets the criteria.
Savannah Craig, APTN National News, Gunassadage, Mohawk Territory.
To Tasqueyak, Cree Nation multi-instrumentalist, singer-songwriter and producer Sebastian Gaskin announced the release of their first ever album this past week called Love Child. He's been working alongside music industry giants like Universal Music Canada and Ishkade Records to launch the release. Veronica Blackhawk has more.
Hello. I haven't seen you in a long while. You look so rested. Please, take a seat. Can I get some?
To put out a record like this, it very much takes a village. You know, everybody from my manager, Matt, to, you know, all the producers who worked on the record, you know, the entire team here at Ishkade.
Earlier this year, Sebastian announced the album debut with a new single titled Song for Granny.
Mama got a new job in the city, she still has your things.
That song was written as a conversation with my late granny, Charlotte. She was this incredible woman, somebody that everybody felt that they could come to in their times of need.
For Sebastian, the song hits close to home and serves as a warm introduction to the album. Despite the impressive feat, the artist has never strayed far from their roots. They were recently nominated for their first Juno Award under Contemporary Indigenous Artist of the Year for their song Brown Man.
I am a brown man, my skin ain't white.
I'm just hoping that I can inspire other kids from reservations. You know, I hope that they can see somebody like me. And for those of you that don't know, I'm from a reservation called the Tasqueyak Cree Nation, which is in northern Manitoba.
Reflecting on their successes, they offer advice to young artists who are looking to find a voice in the arts.
You know, it's very easy to pigeonhole yourself as an artist, which is something that I made it a point not to do. You know, and you'll hear that a lot on this record. There's so many different, like, inspirations and genres and that kind of thing. The second key piece of advice is that perseverance is key.
And she got me like,
I very much could have given up during like 2020. Everything kind of went to the dirt a little bit, you know, in the pandemic. So to finally be back at a point in my career where, you know, I'm able to put out an album with 2 incredible record labels, you know, it's because I persevered.
Love Child is an 11-song album that is set to release on February 21st. You can keep up to date with Sebastian's latest releases through their social media.
Yeah, I think that both the world and I are ready.
I'm Veronica Blackhawk with APTN National News.
Downloaded it yesterday and looking forward to listening to it tonight. The Invictus Games came to a close last weekend. We've got highlights after the break. Welcome back. The Invictus Games have just concluded in Vancouver, and as Tina House tells us, there were many highlights during the 10 days of competition that included injured war veterans from around the globe.
I see
sport has the ability to heal, to change lives, and to save lives.
Through sheer determination, hard work, and support, over 500 competitors from 23 nations battled on the ski hill, to the courts, to the playing field, to push past their limitations and compete at the Invictus Games. Here at the closing ceremonies, the heroes of war were honored, not only for their bravery in serving their countries, but also for their courage to heal from their injuries and proudly represent their countries in sport. The founder of the Invictus Games, the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry, addressed a sold-out crowd, and in particular, the athletes at Rogers Arena.
Thank you for bringing your heart to the forefront of these games and for showing all of us how it's done.
Musicians such as Canadian icons, the Bare Naked Ladies, and Grammy Award winner Jelly Roll performed for the crowd. Vancouver-based The Bitterly Divine rock band, fronted by Tony Joseph, performed at the Invictus Village. Joseph was a major part of the planning team for the Four Host First Nations in bringing the Invictus Games to Vancouver, Whistler.
For me, it's been incredible to meet so many different people and just to actually be here with all of our peoples from all the communities, Indigenous peoples here, strong and proud.
And during the 9-day event, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex visited all Four Host First Nations.
Incredible, genuine people. They came to our community, met with over 100 of our children from our communities. They shared their songs, they shared our dances with them, they welcomed them, they sat with them, talked with them, and just shared stories. And for me, that was incredible.
Nick Booth is the CEO of True Patriot Love. He was behind the bid to bring the games to Vancouver, Whistler.
It's just such an honor to be here on the lands of the Four Host First Nations and to have been on this journey. It was 5 years ago that True Patriot Love decided to bid to bring the games back to Canada. We were here in 2017, but we wanted to come to the beautiful lands in British Columbia.
And during the closing ceremonies, Prince Harry had a message for Indigenous people across Canada.
To the host nations, to the host First Nations, thank you for your partnership, your friendship over the past 3 years. What your people have endured should never have happened. You've shown us what it looks like to fight for the survival of something far greater. Something far greater. Your land, your culture, your communities, and your light. You show the world how to move forward, armed with the truth in order to achieve reconciliation. And for that, we are forever grateful. Chin Chin Swai.
The next Invictus Games takes place in Birmingham, England in 2027. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
And that is all the time we have for your APTN National News for this weekend. You can find much more over on our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward, Marcy McGuitch. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.